3. Old Dyson had never paid much mind to the interior of the guard building. It was one of those places the farmer passed constantly. But, as he had never been arrested for drunkenness or fighting, there had been no reason for him to ever enter it. But now, he sat in one of the 2 barred rooms in the back quarter. To reach him, visitors and prisoners had to enter an inner wooden door and walk down a short corridor. Old Dyson, sitting in the first cell, felt entirely cut off from the world. A worn wooden bench acted as a chair, table, and bed. Old Dyson had lived here for 4 days now, 2 days in which his farm had been left all but unattended. The crops needed weeding and irrigating, and the animals had to be cared for. Mendelin had promised to see everything, but old Dyson feared that his brother was not up to such a task on his own, especially while also worrying about his elder sibling. Moreover, while the earlier storm had, ironically, blown itself out fairly quickly and with little violence, the clouds had remained over Sarum since then, and old Dyson feared that another tempest, and perhaps a greater one, might follow. The farm had been fortunate the first time, but a second assault might throw it into a turmoil from which it could not survive. He knew that the farm should have been the least of his worries. The situation involving the murders had grown even worse than old Dyson had imagined it could. With both victims members of the leading sex, Darius had felt compelled to send word to Tolson, where the cathedral and the temple had a permanent presence. He had requested that representatives from one or both come to help oversee the matter. The 2 surviving missionaries had ridden along with 2 messages, supposedly in order to give testimony to their particular masters. In addition, while the headman continued to promise old Dyson that all would turn out well in the end, he had insisted that Captain Tiberius keep the Senadomites locked up for that time, lest there be some question as to Sarum's notions of justice for the victims. Old Dyson remained dumbstruck by what had happened to the second missionary. According to the more detailed story told him later by the erstwhile guard commander, the cathedral's emissary had been found on his back, his face contorted in what Tiberius freely called absolute fear, and the farmer's knife, upon whose wooden handle old Dyson had made his mark, thrust deep into the ribcage. Compared with the corpse that he had discovered, the second body had barely been touched. That, however, made the crime no less terrible. In fact, no one could recall such a multiple tragedy since the plague had swept through. The same plague that had taken old Dyson's family. Saranthina came to visit him each day, giving him hopeful word from many others unable to do the same. The consensus by those who knew him was that old Dyson was utterly innocent. Achilles had already blackened the eye of one man who had suggested otherwise. As old Dyson sat with his head in his hands, he thought not of himself, but of Lila. She had not come to him once since his incarceration. Not that he had expected her. Indeed, the farmer hoped that she would continue to stay away, lest she somehow be drawn into the madness. Soon, he kept promising himself. Soon, he'd be released, and then the 2 of them could meet again. If she even remained in Sarum. Thought of never seeing the noble woman again fueled old Dyson's already tremendous anxiety. His entire life seemed to have turned into some nightmare. He had not even felt this way when his family had died, but now those memories too added their terrible weight to his already overburdened shoulders. Not for the first time. The walls of his tiny chamber seemed to close in on him. Old Dyson had been born and raised on the farm. He had never known anything else but freedom. When his mother had perished, old Dyson had run out into the fields and shouted out his agony, aware that only his brother was there to hear him. "Gotta get out. I've got to get out. I've got to get out." Their words ran through his mind over and over again, swelling in significance with each repetition. Old Dyson stared bleary-eyed at the door to his cell, unable to accept the bars and the lock. Animals were kept locked up in pens. Not him. Not. There was a slight groan and a click. The cell door swung back with a metallic squeal. Old Dyson threw himself against the back wall as it happened. He watched in utter amazement as the door swung completely around, clinging against another part of the barred front. The entrance to the cell stood wide open before old Dyson, but the farmer made no move whatsoever toward it. He had no idea what had just happened, and despite his deep desire to be out of this place, the doorway enticed him not in the least. At that moment, the wooden door down the hall also opened. Tiberius and two of his men marched down the halls toward the cells. When he saw old Dyson's cell, the captain came to a jarring halt. "What the?" Recovering, he snapped his fingers at the two guards, leapt into the cell to cover the prisoner. As they kept old Dyson at bay, Tiberius inspected the door. No scratches. No damage at all. He glared at the farmer, searching for anything that might be used for a key. The guards did so. However, they came up empty-handed, just as old Dyson knew they would. Tiberius stepped up to his prisoner. Waving the guards back, he leaned close and whispered, "I don't like having you here any more than you do like being here, old Dyson. You may not believe this, old friend, but I don't think you any more guilty than I am for what happened to those two." "Then why?" "This may only be serum, but I'll run the guard here like it's Kedgen myself. My father served in the guard there 3 years, and then ran things here. I'll not dishonor his memory by failing in my duty. We'll do this as decreed, however disdainful it may seem." While Dyson could respect Tiberius' position, did nothing to assuade him. "I just want this over with. I've done nothing, and that'll be proven. You'll see." The captain gestured at the door. "But that will only make matters worse." "I didn't do that. It just opened up on its own." Tiberius looked disappointed. "I'd expected better from you, Dyson. There's nothing wrong with that door. I checked." "I swear by my father." With a deepening frown, the captain grunted, then turned away. He stepped out of the cell, the guards following. One of the men shut the door, then tested it to make certain it would stay shut. "It's locked tight," the man declared to his commander. Nevertheless, Tiberius checked it himself by seizing the door with both hands and throwing his full weight back. The entire cell wall rattled, but held firmly in place. Captain Tiberius let go, Despite the display, he leaned against the bars and said to the farmer, "Don't do it again. I might have to give an order I wouldn't like to see fulfilled." "Just be patient, old Dyson." The anxious and thoroughly baffled prisoner could only nod. Satisfied, the captain led his men off. One of the guards came back a short time later with a bowl of stew. He tested the door yet again, then with a nod slid the farmer's meal through. As he ate, old Dyson tried to ponder once more what was taking the matters so long. He was clearly innocent. He also wondered how the true murderer could have moved so swiftly. It had only been a short time between the moment of the first grisly discovery and when the cathedral's missionary had been slain. The fiend would have had to almost fly from one end to the other the moment that he had the farmer's knife. Old Dyson ruled out Achilles as a possible madman. The hunter was not only too good of a man, he was a true friend. And he had also been with Mendlin during the entire incident. Then, footsteps echoed down the corridor. But footsteps much lighter, more delicate than the trampling boots of Tiberius and his men. Old Dyson looked up and beheld Lila nearing. "I had to see you," she murmured, her smile hesitant. Cruelly, she feared that he would be angry about her disobedience. But at this point, old Dyson could not reprimand her. She had waited a long time. He was even grateful that the noble woman had not simply fled Sarum, abandoning him to his fate. Still, he started his greeting by saying, "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't stay in the room any longer. This is wrong. It's happening all over again." "What do you mean?" She pressed herself against the bar. Old Dyson put down the bowl and went to her. He had a great urge to crush her in his arms in order to comfort her. He felt as if she were the one in danger, not him. "You were kind to a stranger," she whispered, her hand reaching through the bars to touch his. "A stranger with nowhere to go. You know why?" Lila looked down. "Because of the game between the cathedral and the temple." "The what?" Her eyes shifted up to his, their beauty seizing his gaze. He wanted to drown himself in those eyes. "The game. This is all a game to them, with the winner being the one who survives. They will let nothing and no one stand in their way. And one thing that both despise is a heretic." Old Dyson did not like where the conversation seemed to be heading. What What do you mean, Lila? She glanced back toward the door leading to the cells, then, maintaining her whisper, replied, "This has happened before with my family. We had influence and wealth, both of which the two sought for their own, but we rejected them publicly, and then our world turned upside down. There was violence, the burning of a minor temple, with many of the faithful injured terribly. The fire spread to other buildings nearby. Afterward, it was somehow found that the tragedy had been of human making, and that my family had some tie to it." He gaped. "All lies," she quickly added, clearly taking his shock for belief in her family's guilt. However, old Dyson by no stretch of the imagination suspected Lila of such horror, and by extension, her loved ones either. "I believe you," he quickly told her. "I believe you. Go on." "While we had rejected them, there were others, far more powerful, who had embraced one or the other sect. Accused without true proof, my family was nevertheless stripped of everything. My father and mother were dragged off, never to be seen again. My brother was sent to the dungeons, and my sister forced to wed one of the cathedral's most prominent supporters. A similar fate was intended for me, but I took what money I could get and fled from the city." "And that's how you ended up in Sarum?" "Not at first, and certainly not in the company of those serving the very evil I sought to escape." She bit her lip. "I've told you so much, now I suddenly fear that you might think that I might be responsible for what happened to the two." Old Dyson immediately shook his head. "That's hardly possible. This was done by someone much stronger and certainly more monstrous than you could ever be. It makes more sense that they would suspect me." But something dark occurred to him. "Tell no one else this, though. They might think that I did it on your behest." She put a hand to her mouth at this realization. "I did not think." "Never mind. It'd be best if you leave and don't come back. Things will be all right." "But they won't be. I heard at the inn. There are inquisitors from the Cathedral of Light arriving tomorrow, and someone hinted of peace warders from the temple soon after. It's happening just the same as with me." Her announcement jolted him. He had been told nothing of inquisitors or peace warders coming to Sarum. The arms of justice for each of the two sects. The two groups acted as judges and guards. True, this involved the slaughter of their own, but where Aldyson was concerned, there was hardly a need for either element. The farmer stood there for a moment, trying to think. It was the noblewoman, however, who spoke first. "We made the mistake of letting them act before we did, Aldyson. You cannot let that happen. They will twist everything around so that even if you are innocent, your guilt will be obvious to all. You have to stand up to them. Speak out defiantly, as you have always done. Your friends will rally to you. I know it. Neither the cathedral nor the temple will be able to use your hatred of them against you then." There were points he would have argued, but they faded to nothing under the arresting beauty of those eyes. He finally decided that Lila was right. Aldyson would make use of the lesson of her family to save him. And her too. "You must do it," she breathed. "Please, for our sake." Without warning, the nobleman pulled his face close to the bars, then kissed him. As the farmer stood there completely at a loss, Lila, her face scarlet, fled the area. Old Dyson watched her vanish. Blinking, he suddenly recalled the door. As the guard had done, the farmer tested it. The door held, as it should have. To old Dyson, that settled everything. Lila was absolutely right. He needed to stand up for himself. The Inquisitors, and the Peace Warders, assuming that they too were on their way, would be looking for guilt, not innocence. He would do his best to leave them disappointed. Serenthina pulled back out of sight of the guard headquarters as Lila passed. She had no real reason for doing so, save for what she realized was likely jealousy in what to her had been a ridiculously short time. Old Dyson had clearly fallen for the blonde woman. She had been able to do with her mere appearance what Serenthina had for years often hoped of doing. Even as a child, she had been fascinated by old Dyson's perseverance, his inner strength, especially the way in which he had managed the terrible deaths in his family. Lila vanished in the direction of the Boar's Head. Cyrus's daughter waited a few moments more, then stepped from behind the corner of the smithy, at which point she collided with Achilles. "Sari!" he managed. "Where did you? I'm so sorry." Serenthina felt her face flush. While she had spent much of her life pursuing old Dyson, Achilles had done the same in regards to her. It was not unflattering either, for he was handsome and well-respected and treated her the way a woman wanted to be treated. Common sense said that the trader's daughter should have accepted his courting with pleasure, but although Serenthina welcomed the hunter's company, she just not given up on her dream of gaining old Dyson's love. Of course, that had been before the arrival of Lila. "I was looking for Mendelin," Achilles finally managed, his own countenance somewhat reddened. "But this is a happy accident." His cheerfulness did not suit her at the moment, not with old Dyson locked up for the foul deeds he could never in his life have had committed. Her annoyance with Achilles' pleasantry must have shown, for the hunter quickly sobered. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to be light. Were you on your way to see old Dyson?" "Yes, but I didn't wish to disturb him. He had another visitor." "Oh." The hunter's brow arched. "Ah, the fair Lila." It made matters worse to Serenthina to hear Achilles also mention her in such terms. Yes, the noblewoman was beautiful, but Cyrus's daughter knew that she could attract the attention of men too, with the exception of the one she wanted. "She just left. I think I saw her return to the inn." Achilles rubbed his chin. I wonder how that went over with Odaison. He said that he wanted her to stay away, so that she wouldn't be drawn into the situation any more than necessary. Saranthina had a twinge of hope that perhaps Lila had angered old Diason with her visit, but immediately after suspected that such was not the case. Like most men, he had surely forgiven her once she had gazed up at him or smiled. She recalled Achilleos' question. I haven't seen Mendelin. In fact, I haven't seen him in 2 days. Has he been to see his brother even? Not since early 3 days ago, from what I know, answered the archer, much perturbed now. And when I rode out to the farm, I found young Josdivo, Marcus, old Ampwood's second son, doing the chores there. He said that Mendelin paid him for the work without explaining where he planned to go. Saranthina could understand why Mendelin might have left the farm in the hands of someone more competent than himself, but that he had not ridden to his brother's side immediately after, and then stayed there, she could not fathom. Mendelin was very loyal to old Diason, and when he had heard the news concerning his brother, he had denied the charges with far more vehemence than any would have expected from the scholarly sibling. I worry about him, Sari, Achilleos went on. I doubt that he can imagine the world without old Diason, which is not my way of saying that old Diason is in any danger of being condemned for those awful crimes. No, I'm speaking only of Mendelin. He's not been the same since that day. It almost sounded to Cyrus's daughter as if Achilleos had been about to speak of something other than the murders. But what could possibly compare? She could not say. It could be that he is with father, Saranthina finally suggested. I haven't been there since this morning. Perhaps. I wonder. The hunter's gaze shifted away, as if something else had come to mind. He gave a minute shake of his head, then added, You should go on with your visit with old Diason, Sari. I'll find Mendelin soon, I'm certain. You just don't... His mouth snapped shut, and his eyes now stared wide and disturbed at something beyond his companion. Fearful that she already knew just what that might be, the black-tressed woman followed his gaze. The party of riders had just reached the edge of the village. They rode slowly and confidently, looking as if they owned all they surveyed. There was no mistaking them for what they were. The glistening silver robes and breastplates, obvious sign enough, even without the golden sunburst set in the center of the latter, to definitely mark them as the inquisitors of the Cathedral of Light. All wore round crested helmets atop their heads, save for the lead rider, whose thick gray mane was draped by a golden hood. Behind him flowed the rest of the shimmering cloak, the bottom hem nearly blinding the horse behind his own. The cleric was clean-shaven, as were all those who served directly under the prophet. This was not mere personal choice, but a purposeful decision. After all, the prophet himself wore no beard, and, if rumored to be true, looked young enough to be this cleric's grandson, despite supposedly being much older. The party numbered a dozen at least, a number that startled both onlookers. Dorios had given every indication that he had expected two at most, and none of them of such authority as he now dismounted. The Master Inquisitor, Saranthina knew that the distinguished figure could have no lesser role, surveyed Sarum as if uncertain that this backwater could be his destination. He suddenly noted the pair and immediately signaled them to approach. Well aware that this man held much sway over old Dyson's fate, Saranthina obeyed instantly, with the archer but a step behind. I am Brother Makilios! Boomed the Master Inquisitor, as if seeking to announce it to every inhabitant within a mile. Is this then Sarum, the scene of such terrible doings? This is Sarum, yes, Holiness, Saranthina responded meekly, curtsying at the same time. Unlike old Dyson or Chilios, she had some belief in the teachings of both the cathedral and the Triune, but had yet to decide which was her preference. The Triune taught of the power of the individual, while the cathedral preached that it was humanity's combined efforts that would best see it achieved its ultimate destiny. Who's in charge? We were supposed to be met. Our head man is Dorius, who... Brother Makilios cut her off. Never mind! You! He pointed at Achilles. You know where the body of our unfortunate brother lies? Following Saranthina's example, the hunter bowed. I believe I know where he is buried. When the Master Inquisitor frowned, Achilles added, It has been several days, Holiness. Both bodies have been put to rest, or else they... He spread his hands. Well, you understand. Of course, my son, of course. Lead us to the grave, then. With due respect, Holiness, it'd be proper if Master Dorios or Captain Tiberius led you to. We are here, declared Brother Makilios firmly. They are not. We shall speak with them at first possible opportunity. And the barbarous heretic, too. Saranthina stifled a sound at this description of old Diason. She wondered what Dorios' messenger had relayed to the Master Inquisitor. Brother Makilios sounded certain that the true murderer had already been caught. Your Holiness, she began, but Brother Makilios had already started past her, 4 of his guards accompanying. The rest of his party began fanning out as if preparing to attack Sarum, and, in truth, they looked capable of winning such a battle, even outnumbered as they were. It's this way, Achilles said with a tone of surrender. The main Inquisitor paid Saranthina no further mind, but at the same time he also did not keep her from following. Cyrus's daughter wanted to run to old Diason and warn him of the cathedral's arrival, but she also did not want to miss whatever Brother Makilios might say or do, even if Achilles was also there to witness it. Several villagers, perhaps alerted by the Master Inquisitor's loud voice, stepped out to see what was going on. Brother Makilios acknowledged them with an occasional wave and pious nod as he strode commandingly toward the burial sites. The sky rumbled, but otherwise the late day seemed oddly calm. There was not even the least wind. Something unusual. As Saranthina entered the village cemetery behind the others, she felt as if the spirits of the dead all stood, hushed, around them. A dank stone wall, waist high, surrounded the grounds. Here and there, broken areas. Speaking of some neglect, it was not difficult to find where the victims had been buried, for not only were they the only fresh graves, but they were in a corner far from the rest. Unspoken by all the villagers was the hope that their interment was only temporary, and that the cathedral and temple would claim their own and thus allow Sarum to forget what had happened. Whether or not her village would ever forget, Saranthina saw that it was indeed Brother Mercurius' intention to do something with the body of the dead acolyte. He gestured at a pair of shovels set next to the side wall, and two of his armed escort immediately went to retrieve them. "This will be far enough for you," the Master Inquisitor said to Achilleus. And by way of that, to the trailing Saranthina, "This is now a matter for the cathedral alone." The hunter wisely bowed, then stepped back. Crudely etched into the wooden markers over each of the graves was the sign of the victim's calling. Brother Mercurius sniffed at the one signifying the triune, then proceeded to the other. The two guards wielding shovels followed at his heels. The Master Inquisitor went down on one knee before the marker. He ran a gloved finger over the symbol on the marker. Then, muttering under his breath what Saranthina was a prayer, set his hand on top of the mound. And, almost immediately thereafter, pulled it back, as if scorpions had suddenly sprouted out of the dirt in great numbers. His countenance more grim than ever. Brother Mercurius leaned forward again, then removed from around his neck a chain that his robe had hidden. At the end of the chain was a golden medallion in the shape of a sunburst. The centerpiece was a clear gemstone that glistened, even despite the cloud cover. The cleric held the medallion over the spot in question, muttered for a moment more, then drew back, once again seemingly aghast. Eyes blazing, Brother Mercurius turned on the two. "Who has done this? Who dares this sacrilege?" Achilleus looked at her, but she had no explanation for him. The Master Inquisitor stood straight, then pointed at the grave. "You! By your garments and that bow, I gather that you must be a huntsman." "That I am." "Then you have a practiced eye. Use it. Come close and tell me what you see." Achilleus reluctantly obeyed. Under the watchful glances of the Inquisitor guards, he stepped up to the mount. "Look close," demanded Brother Mercurius. As Saranthina watched, Achilleus knelt just as the Master Inquisitor had. He even ran his hand gently over the same location touched by the former. And just as Brother Mercurius had done, the hunter could not help momentarily jerking his hand back. This was all the robed figure evidently needed to verify his suspicions. "Yes, you see it. Also, do you not, huntsman?" Cyrus's daughter started forward, but a breastplated guard easily blocked her way. She watched in utter confusion as Achilleus slowly rose to face the Master Inquisitor. "Perhaps a small animal, Holiness. Sarum is, after all, surrounded by woods for..." "This was done by no animal," Brother Mercurius fairly hissed. A suspicion concerning what they spoke about flashed through Saranthina's thoughts, causing her to gasp. Brother Mercurius turned his glare her direction. "Who was it?" he demanded, as if she knew the answer. "Who has done this?" Holiness, Seraphina managed. I don't understand. Achilles sought to intercede. She couldn't. He would have none of either protest. The Master Inquisitor arm cut the air sharply as his imperious eyes looked down at both. I will say this succulently and clearly only one more time. The guards suddenly shifted position, surrounding the pair as if they were criminals. Who has desecrated the grave and body of our murdered brother?